The guard didn't even look up when I walked in, just tapped his clipboard with the back of his pen and pointed down the service hallway like I was some banquet temp clocking in to fold napkins. I stopped in my tracks for half a second. That little motion hit harder than it should have. Quick check, drop in the comments where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how many places around the world you're all joining from. My name's Victor Navarro. I'm 55 years old. I live in Riverside, just outside Chicago. The party upstairs, my son's engagement, I paid for it. Not just the food, not just the booze, the entire space. Summit House, penthouse level of Lakeview Tower belongs to me. My name's on the deed. The same building I gutted and rebuilt floor by floor, buying in deep during a slow winter when everybody else was too scared to spend. I had the black card in my jacket pocket. Custom access, building crest etched in silver, made the same week I signed for the top 2 floors. Still, the guard didn't ask for it. Just saw a guy in a suit, no name tag, no clipboard, and assumed I was back of house. And yeah, I started back of house. First job I had was sweeping floors in a drafty banquet hall I bought years later for $240,000, with a leaky roof and a furnace that coughed up soot if you looked at it wrong. 28 years later, that same company, Navarro Venue Group, owns 21 venues across 6 states, 3 restaurants, 2 parking decks, and has over 3,000 people on payroll. But to the Pierces, I was still the event guy. Old money, that smug Lake Forest bloodline, with houses older than the Great Depression and more oil portraits than conversations. First time I met her mom, Lila, she called my work events, like it was a charming little side hustle. I smiled and let it pass. People like her expect you to chase approval. Evan told me Madeline was classy. 27, sharp dresser, careful talker. I wanted to believe him. Kid's got a good heart, still checks on his grandparents, still helps the neighbors shovel snow without being asked. But tonight, when I stepped back from the guard's clipboard, I heard Madeline's voice in the hallway behind him. "I told you we needed better staff flow," she said. Soft laugh. Then her mother chimed in, something about food service speed, and they walked right past without seeing me. I didn't say a word, just stepped back, hands in pockets. That card in my jacket felt heavier now than it did the week I signed the deed. I stayed where I was and waited. Let them keep walking. Let the whole show roll forward. Sometimes the best move is silence. Let people reveal themselves when the lights are bright. The Pierce dining room was long and cold, all chandelier light and polished edges. The table was some kind of antique, probably shipped from a country where they still carve furniture by hand and price it by surname. Madeline's mother, Lila, made a point of telling me it was from Italy, same tone someone might use to mention an allergy. I just nodded and unfolded my napkin. Dinner started with a chilled soup I couldn't pronounce and didn't like, but I smiled and ate it anyway. Charles kept asking Evan questions he already knew the answers to: where they met, what he majored in, what kind of law he planned to practice. The whole thing felt rehearsed, like Charles had a script and no interest in rewrites. Evan did his best, tried to bring me in, but Charles kept the spotlight bouncing between himself and his daughter like the rest of us were crew. Lila watched me while she talked. I've seen that look before, part assessment, part dismissal. She asked if it was stressful managing event vendors and said it like she was being generous by pretending to care. I told her I didn't manage vendors. I owned the properties. She smiled like I'd told her I collected bottle caps. Charles leaned in after that and said, "So, you're kind of a silent partner in the business then?" And I had to let out a small breath to keep from laughing. "No," I said. "I'm the founder. I'm the one who writes the checks and inspects the roofs and signs off on insurance. There's nothing silent about it." That landed with a little thud on the table. Lila raised her wine glass but didn't drink from it. Charles switched topics fast, something about his club's Greens Committee needing new bylaws, and Madeline jumped in to steer things back to the engagement. They mentioned the party like it was already decided. Lila had numbers. "About 140 from our side. Perhaps 10 or so from yours?" she said, looking at me like she was trying to be gracious. Madeline added that her parents had key contacts they needed to include, some kind of foundation angle, people who support the family's philanthropic work. Evan caught my eye across the table. He knew it was off. I gave him a small shrug, told him silently that I was fine. It wasn't the time or place to press it, but I clocked it all. Every phrase, every glance, every polite little jab. After dinner, we stood around in the sitting room for a bit. No coffee, no dessert. Just soft classical music and people waiting for someone to say it was time to go. Lila complimented Evan's tie and mentioned a donor brunch next month that she hoped they could swing by. Charles walked me to the door, barely said goodbye. In the car, Evan was quiet at first. About 10 minutes in, he finally said, "They don't get it." "They don't need to," I told him. "They just need to act like they respect people." "That's free?" He glanced over. "You sure you're okay doing the party at Summit?" "Business is business," I said. "They signed the contract, and I want to see how they act in a room they can't pretend to own." He nodded, pulled his coat tighter. The ride down the Edens was quiet after that. I kept my eyes on the road, but in my head, I was already back in that old banquet hall from 28 years ago. The one with the busted furnace and sagging floorboards. The one I rebuilt, alone some nights, so people like Charles could rent it and pretend they belong there by default. The emails started slow, then picked up like sleet, thin, cold, and just annoying enough to be felt. Every day brought more. PDFs labeled run of show, spreadsheets listing arrival windows, color-coded dietary needs, and some digital seating chart with names stacked like auction bids. The fonts were too small. The tone was too confident. Somewhere in there, a strings quartet list showed up with 15 pieces and 4-time transitions, and a legacy donor wall layout I'd never approved, listing names I didn't recognize under foundational relationships. I scrolled through it 3 times before it sank in. These people weren't just planning a party. They were staging a performance, and my kid's name was the set piece. I checked the guest list again. My side barely filled a column. My sister Nora, an old high school friend, a couple managers who'd seen Evan grow up, and a +1 slot that felt like a participation trophy. The Pierce side had titles behind names, initials that smelled like board seats, and legacy families who probably had more portraits than relatives they actually liked. I flagged the seating chart when it came through. At the bottom was a note. "We placed your father near staff entry for comfort. Service flow is smoother." That line sat in my gut like a stone. I read it again at the kitchen table, right next to a cup of coffee that had gone cold before I even touched it. I called Evan. "Did you see this?" I asked. "No," he said, and I could hear him pulling up the file. "I'll fix it. That's not what I told them." He still had that tone. Like if you just explained it calmly, people would listen. Like decency always wins. I didn't tell him the truth. That decency only wins when the other side still thinks it matters. Guest lists are maps. They tell you who gets seen, who gets buried, and who's expected to smile anyway. I didn't rage. I didn't email back. I saved the file. The way a person saves a receipt, not because they plan to return anything, but because it might matter later when the math stops adding up. Evan called the next day, said I'd been moved to table 4 near the windows. I thanked him. I meant it, but I filed it mentally, right next to the roof. Quotes and linen samples. A detail that meant more than it should have. Then came the decorator. She wanted to hang a full Pierce Foundation banner over the main bar, right across the space where our permits go. My ops director told her, no, regulations require visibility. She acted like we'd slapped her with a mop. They sent another note about preferential bottle placement and asked us to hide certain spirits to avoid brand conflict. I laughed out loud at that one. Folks who have never stocked a bar in their lives love to rewrite the industry in emails. Evan dropped by one afternoon. He looked beat, circles under his eyes, collar loose. "Can we just get through the night?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, we can. But after that, no more slow bleeds. If something feels wrong, name it." He gave a half smile and nodded. Then I got a text from my events lead. Final head counts confirmed. I picked up the phone, told them to lock it down, and if anyone started pushing staff around, to send them straight to Patricia. Patricia didn't say anything right away. She took one slow lap of the space, past the two-top table by the swinging door, around the bus station, through the sight line to the ballroom. When she came back to me, she didn't have to ask what was wrong. She already knew. Thomas stood beside her, tall and easy like always, hands in his jacket pockets, scanning the floor like he was reading a blueprint no one else could see. He gave the room one good look, nodded once, and said, "We can fix this without moving a single plate." That's why I called them. No drama, no noise, just efficiency and respect. I leaned against the wall near the kitchen pass, watching my staff glide through prep, like this was just another Saturday booking. A dishwasher walked past with a rack of stemware, nodded at me like he didn't even notice the white linen joke of a table behind me. That meant something. Patricia tapped her tablet and made 2 calls. A minute later, the floor manager came down from the main room, with the air of someone who hadn't been briefed properly. She opened her mouth, saw Thomas, and shut it again. Smart. Staff protocol override, Patricia told her. Owner's table is repositioned. We'll handle the guest interface. Her tone was flat, professional, with just enough edge to freeze out questions. The swing door cracked open, and one of the cater waiters peeked through, then ducked back into the main room like he'd stepped into the wrong scene. I saw the chandelier flicker across the pass window again. Strings tuning, voices rising. The show was about to begin. I could feel the quiet press of it all building, like steam under a lid. That kind of pressure, it breaks things unless you release it just right. Patricia knew it too. She turned to me and said, "You want to do this now or after the first toast?" "Now," I said. No point letting it sour in the dark. Thomas already had the logistics worked out. It's just, he angled his body to block the view from the pass, motioned 2 servers toward the ballroom doors, and gave a quick, quiet set of instructions that sounded like choreography. One of them peeled off to the coat check. The other adjusted a lighting cue near the bar like it was any other night. That's the part people don't see, the engine behind the event, the weight of experience moving underneath the glitter. While the Pierces were up there playing host, we were down here making sure the foundation didn't crack. The hallway smelled like starch and citrus. The buzz of the refrigeration units undercut the music above like a steady heartbeat. This is where the real work happens, not in speeches or floral arrangements, but in moments like this, where dignity and control hang by a thread, and the people holding it are wearing name tags. I buttoned my jacket, rolled my shoulders once, and said, "Let's bring Charles down." Thomas didn't hustle, because he never had to. He stepped away like he was going to check a breaker box, and Patricia turned to me with that look she saved for when somebody tried to play games in one of our rooms. "Talk to me," she said, steady and low, like we were in a meeting and not 10 feet from a dish pit. "I got parked by the kitchen at my own son's engagement party," I said. "In a venue I own. We're handling it clean, with 0 furniture broken." Patricia's jaw tightened once, then went smooth again. Thomas came back a minute later, eyes focused like he'd counted every head without staring. 146 guests are in, he said. About 24 more are on the list. Bar is backing up at the far station because the left aisle is blocked by that flower wall. "Fetch Mr. Pierce," I told him. "Bring him back here." Thomas nodded like he appreciated a simple chain of command. A few minutes later, Charles Pierce walked into the service corridor, wearing that tight smile rich guys use when they think someone's about to ask for a favor. He looked around at stainless steel, stacked trays, and the swing door like he'd wandered into the wrong bathroom. "This is irregular," he started, and then Patricia stepped half a pace forward. "Mr. Navarro is the owner," she said, calm as a receipt printer. Charles froze, and I watched his eyes adjust like he'd stepped out into harsh sunlight. He tried to recover with a little laugh that didn't land anywhere. I kept my voice even. "We appreciate your business, and I honor contracts. I'm trying to understand why I'm tucked beside a bus door while your donors drink in my ballroom." His mouth opened, then shut. Before he could find a new angle, heels clicked from the hallway, and Lila Pierce appeared, floating in like she was arriving at a gallery opening. Madeline was right behind her, wearing that event night glow that looked good until it didn't. "Victor," Lila said, smiling at a spot near my shoulder instead of my eyes. "It's simply logistics. We made adjustments for flow." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. What logistics puts the father of the groom next to a dish pit? Lila blinked like I'd spoken the wrong language, then tried to smile again. She didn't answer my question. Madeline saw Patricia's tablet, saw Thomas's radio, and the color drained out of her face so fast it was almost impressive. I held her gaze. "I heard you preferred I be out of sight." Madeline's lips parted, then pressed together. Her eyes flicked to her mother, quick and scared, like she was waiting for the approved script. Charles cleared his throat and tried to pivot. "We have very sensitive relationships in this room, Victor. Reputation matters, and the foundation—" Patricia cut in before he could build momentum. House rules require respectful treatment of all guests and staff. If conduct creates a hostile environment, we reserve the right to intervene up to and including stopping service. Charles swallowed hard. Is this really necessary? Patricia didn't flinch. It's necessary for the dignity of the event and the safety of staff and guests. That line hit heavier than any shouting match. Even from behind the swing door, I could feel the party's energy hesitate, like people sensed something shifting. A florist at the corridor edge paused with her scissors half open. The quartet kept playing upstairs, soft notes pretending everything was fine. I looked at all three of them, Charles, Lila, Madeline, and kept it simple. We're not shutting anything down. We're moving me into that room, and we're speaking to my son in plain English about what you did before the cake gets cut. Then I nodded at Thomas and stepped toward the ballroom doors. We stepped through the doors and into the main room. Me, Patricia, Thomas, and the Pierces, right as the string quartet moved into something delicate and expensive. Not quite classical, not quite pop, just enough to keep money in the air. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. That quiet dip you get when people sense something walking through that doesn't match the centerpieces. Evan stood near the tall windows with a couple of his college friends, laughing at something with his drink in hand. He saw me, and his face lit up until he saw the rest of them behind me. His smile faltered fast. "Dad?" he asked, already walking over. "We need a minute," I told him, and I steered us just off the main path, near a high top by the soundboard, where the light came in soft, and nobody could pretend they didn't hear every word. I didn't circle it, just asked him straight. "Did you put me by the kitchen?" He shook his head. "No, you were supposed to be at table 4 near the windows." Then he turned to Madeline, waiting, not angry, just expecting her to step up and fix what she'd broken. Madeline looked down, then up, holding her tone flat like she was auditioning for calm. "I moved him. It's complicated." "No," Evan said. "It's not." That sentence didn't echo, but it landed heavy. You could feel people pulling their attention toward us without turning their heads. The hum of polite laughter faded in a 10-foot radius. Some moments aren't for saving. They're for watching your kid choose who he wants to be. Around us, conversation stretched back into place, like a tablecloth pulled tight after a spill. The Pierces lingered awkward, still holding wine glasses like props. A few guests peeked over, trying not to be caught watching. One woman offered me a look of real sympathy. The rest looked away, careful not to get involved. I stayed planted. Let the quiet roll over me. Evan's walk to the elevator wasn't loud, but it was the truest thing I'd seen in weeks. Later that week, one of his college friends pulled me aside and said, "That's the first time he's looked like himself in months." I nodded, said thank you, and kept that in my pocket. You don't need a microphone to change direction. Sometimes all you need is one good walk and a kid who doesn't blink. The doors shut behind Evan, and the whole room did the hum people do when something breaks and no one's sure who's supposed to fix it. Not loud, not dramatic, just a tight buzz of shifting glances and uncomfortable wine sips. I could feel eyes on my back like heat lamps in an old diner kitchen. Madeline stood still, mascara smudged just enough to draw sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said, voice small, trembling like she thought that made it more true. I didn't raise mine. "I believe you're upset. Sorry comes later, after the fix." I didn't say it to be cruel. I just didn't believe in skipping steps. I turned to Patricia. "Walk me to the bar." She nodded once, and we moved through that space like current through water, slow, deliberate, and impossible to stop. People stepped aside without knowing why. My managers saw me coming and straightened their postures like I'd pulled a fire alarm. I stopped to shake hands with 2 of them, quick, respectful, not a word wasted. Thanked the kitchen lead for keeping pace, told him the steaks looked perfect. Then I leaned in and told the bartender on Station B to ease up on the pours. Someone near the back wall was trying to drink a point into existence. Lila intercepted us with that brittle smile of hers. "Victor," she said, "I think we can change how we talk about this." "We can tell the truth," I said. Her smile didn't crack, but it thinned. Charles came up behind her, muttering something about reputational harm, and I cut him off with one line. The only harm here was seating a man beside a service entrance. Then I stepped around him. I don't argue with people mid-party. It's a waste of breath. We hit the lobby 2 minutes later. Patricia didn't ask if I wanted company. She just came with me like she always did when things needed a spine instead of a speech. Evan was there, standing by the windows, staring out like the street might hand him the answer he hadn't found upstairs. His jacket was still open, tie loose, hands in his pockets like he didn't trust them not to shake. We didn't hug, we didn't make a scene, we just walked to the elevator in silence. In the garage, he finally spoke. "I'm embarrassed." "You didn't do this," I said. "I brought them into our world." "Bringing people in isn't wrong," I told him. "Keeping them honest is the job." He nodded, eyes forward. We drove separate. He needed air, and I needed to make a few calls. By the time I hit Western Avenue, my phone had buzzed 3 times. Different guests from the party asking if I was okay, like the truth had walked out the door ahead of me, dressed up as rumor. When I got home, I didn't turn on the TV. Just dropped my keys on the counter, turned my phone face down, and sat with the hum of my old fridge. That sound had been there through big winds and bad nights, steady, unchanged. I let it run while the smoke cleared. The next morning, the Whisper network was already in motion. Texts stacked like cards, some concerned, most strategic. A vendor sent a condolence emoji. 2 managers asked if I was all right in the kind of language that meant they were checking if they were still safe. People treat parties like they're private until something cracks. Then everyone thinks they get a say. Solutions come wrapped in gossip, and gossip comes dressed as care. I made 3 calls, one to ops, to debrief, one to the accountant, to confirm no contractual terms were breached, and one to Evan. "I'm here," I said. Nothing else. That sentence cost nothing. Most people forget to give it. Evan showed up just before 8 with 2 coffees and a look that told me the night had wrung him out. His collar was rumpled, eyes ringed and red like he hadn't blinked in hours. He set the drinks on the counter and said, "We talked until 2. I stared at the ceiling till 4. I nodded, didn't push. Let him get it out the way he needed to. She apologized again, he said, wrapping both hands around his cup. Said it was her mom. Said she panicked about optics and didn't think it'd land like that." "You believe her?" I asked. "Parts of it," he said. "Not the part where she didn't mean to hurt you. She saw what she did. She just hoped you'd stay quiet." I leaned back in my chair. "Don't make decisions tired," I told him. "Wait a week. Let the noise die down. Don't marry a version of someone you invented to get through a bad night." He nodded once, like he knew I wasn't warning him. I was giving him permission to slow down. That same morning, Patricia forwarded me a message. The Pierces wanted a sit-down. I replied myself. Tuesday noon, 1 hour, conference room. You keep things civil with boundaries, not handshakes. When they walked in, Charles had a lawyer in tow, quiet and sharp, the kind who wears his suit like armor. Lila wore a cream blouse and a smile meant to skip straight to forgiveness. I didn't return it. I kept it straight. "I honored your contract, and I'll continue to honor contracts. But I won't host your fall events. The deposit's already been returned." Lila tilted her head. "That feels punitive." "No," I said. "That's clarity. I don't rent to people who treat my people like furniture." She blinked once. The lawyer didn't flinch. Charles adjusted his cuff and said nothing. I had the documents ready. I read the exact lines from the rental agreement about safety, guest conduct, and the right to preserve a respectful environment. Told them we stood by that. Reminded them no policy was broken on our end. And still, I chose to return their funds and walk away clean. Charles stayed stone-faced. The lawyer took a single note. Lila's smile didn't break, but it didn't climb back either. They left with a neat stack of paper and a "we'll reconsider," which meant nothing. That meeting wasn't about punishment. It was about lines, moral ones, legal ones. If you don't draw them, people will. Midweek, Evan met Madeleine again. I didn't ask what was said. His relationship was his to hold or put down. All I told him was, watch her actions. Words are easy. Watch what shifts. 12 days after the party, he called me from the car, said it wasn't going to work, said what stuck with him wasn't the seating. It was the relief on her face when she thought I'd accepted it, like I was supposed to take that hit so her night could stay beautiful. She cried hard, he said. I believe it hurt, I told him. Endings do. That night, he slept 12 hours straight. Next morning, he looked 10 pounds lighter and 5 years clearer. 6 months passed clean. Evan came by one Sunday with a woman named Grace, history teacher, Berwyn Public School, quiet voice, sharp eyes. First thing she asked me was if I still checked my own sprinkler heads. I said yes, and she followed with a question about weight certs for tent rentals, which caught me off guard in the best way. The eighth graders think running places means you just walk around yelling and people do stuff, she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, like being a boss in a TV show. I told her, it means fixing a jammed door at 6 a.m. in February with wet sleeves and still smiling when the first vendor shows up an hour later. She laughed like someone who knew what that meant in her own world, maybe in a classroom with a busted radiator and a student crying about something they couldn't name. It was a practical laugh, not polite, real. I watched Evan while he poured her coffee. He had that look a man gets when he's back on steady ground. No scramble in the shoulders, no scan in the eyes, just anchored, like he finally trusted the quiet. They got engaged early spring, no spectacle, simple ring. Asked if they could throw the party in my backyard, tent, taco truck, just family and a few friends. I said yes before the sentence finished. Grace handled the planning like someone who's seen too many things go sideways and didn't want surprises. She asked if the caterer had gray water permits, asked if the tent crew used weighted bases or stakes. I told her a story about a mariachi band who showed up at the wrong venue once and played 3 songs before anyone noticed. And she laughed so hard she had to sit down. Her laugh filled the yard in a way that made the trees seem closer, softer. We strung cafe lights, laid out rental tables on my grass, pulled out the old speaker that still crackled when the bass hit too hard. Nobody cared. My sister sat by the oak tree all night. No one asked her to move so someone with a title could see better. Grace pulled me aside once, near the cooler. Evan talks about you like a person, not a wallet, she said. Good, I told her. She smiled and nodded like she understood the rest without needing it spelled out. My managers came. My godchild rolled in late from a shift and took 2 plates like he hadn't eaten in a week. The neighbor's dog wandered over, stole a tortilla, and we let him keep it. Evan raised a toast halfway through the night. Nothing grand, just enough to pause the music. My dad taught me that where you sit in a room matters less than who you are when you stand up. Everyone went quiet in the best way. Later, Grace's parents hugged me, asked about parking, noise ordinances, regular stuff. Rain came early. The band packed up and left without a fuss. We moved inside, lit a few candles, and finished the night with board games around my kitchen table. After everyone left, I stood by the sink washing plates. The quiet settled in again, same as that night at Summit House. Only this time, it was warm. And this time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. After the last plate dried and the lights dimmed low in the kitchen, I leaned on the counter and let the quiet finish the job. Not silence, quiet. There's a difference. Silence is what you get when something's missing. Quiet is what you earn when everything's been handled. I've had a lot of nights in rooms I paid for where someone made me feel like I didn't belong. Summit House wasn't the first, and it won't be the last, but it was the cleanest. The pretense cracked quickly. That night didn't break me. It just showed me how much I'd stopped tolerating what I used to let slide. People show you who they are when they think you can't do a thing for them. When they believe you're just a chair, they can move to the side and still expect applause. The Pierces showed me, and I let them. That's the thing about daylight. It doesn't destroy the lie. It just makes it harder to look at. I didn't scream, didn't sue, didn't torch their calendar. I walked out of that night with my dignity folded neat and my policies clearer. You treat my people right, or you take your party somewhere else. Evan didn't just walk away from a woman, he walked away from the version of himself that would have stayed quiet to keep the peace. He didn't perform, he stood. And that taught me more about what I'd built than any appraisal number ever has. Grace came in asking about exhaust fans, fire code compliance, and ground slope tolerances for backyard tents. Not to flatter, not to test me, just because she was paying attention. And I watched my son exhale into that kind of attention, like someone who finally stopped holding his breath. I still walk the venues, still duck into dish pits, still check if the walk-in is running cold enough. That's not nostalgia, that's maintenance. If I forget where the lift came from, the wait stops meaning anything. Every so often I pass that two-top by the kitchen, the one they assigned me like I was a noise to muffle. And I stop, just for a second, not to stew, not to sulk, but to log the moment. Like a line in a ledger, what it cost, what it paid back, and what changed because of it. It's simple. If you need to shrink someone else to feel big, the room you're in is already too small for you. I don't rent rooms to that anymore. These days, I pay attention to the small things. Who greeted the coat check, who thanked the server, who listened when the dishwasher warned about a backup. That's the real accounting. So if another clipboard ever points me to the service corridor, I'll smile, thank the guard, and take the long way around to the front. Some doors you earn, some lessons you don't unlearn. So when a clipboard points you to the service corridor again, which door will you choose? If you've got hype, tap it to boost this video so more people see it. Please subscribe and like, it truly helps. Drop a comment, even good story, or share your take.